Welcome to Foundation. Today we're talking to Matt Galligan. He's a serial entrepreneur who is the co-founder of Social Thing, Simple Geo, and now Circa, the popular news app on iOS and Android. Let's chat with him. So before we get started, let's talk about the beer.
Okay.
This is amazing. I love it. Where'd you get this?
All right, so this is from a brewery near where I grew up called Schlafly. And it's a pumpkin beer. So it's basically pumpkin pie in a bottle.
It is pumpkin pie.
It's unreal.
Did they add sugar to it? They must.
No.
Really?
No. I mean, they may add some different things like it's like a liquid sugar that brewers use in like Belgium, but
like a liquid sugar.
But no.
That's got to be basically sugar then, right? Did they say? I mean,
well, so like malt, like the grain that they use, you know,
Right.
that turns into sugar, and so that's. But
Right.
there's no sweeteners in here, none at all.
Cool. How did you get this here?
Well, my mom recently came to visit, and
Special delivery from mom.
yeah,
Mom delivers
so
are the best.
she packages it up and puts it in her bag, and gets it out here, and so I'm pretty lucky that I get to have my Schlafly from the Midwest, my favorite pumpkin ale of them all.
That's awesome. Cool. So thanks for bringing the beer.
Totally.
Let's cheers, by the way.
Cheers.
Thanks for agreeing to doing the interview.
Of course.
I want to start off. Let me take a sip of the beer because I cheers to you, and that's like proper
so
etiquette. I'd like to start off with where you grew up. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a tiny little farming town in central Illinois called Williamsville. Like 1,000 people, cornfields on every side. Very, very small place.
This is funny. I just got done interviewing Ev Williams in like very similar type surroundings.
You know, it's the Midwest is a great place, and certainly brings out some good scrappy people, I think.
How did you get involved in computers? Like that was very early age, or?
Yeah, we didn't really have a computer really early on. Like it was probably in my 6th grade year. There was a teacher that I had, Miss Lane, and she taught us how to do HTML, like just programming from a really early age. And so I really picked up computers then and got really excited about them. But it was an opportunity I had when I was a freshman in high school that really changed everything. So in my keyboarding class, I was, really
class.
good. Yeah, keyboarding, right?
I had keyboarding class as well.
I was pretty good, right? And I was good at the computers, and so the teacher was like, "Hey, I know this businessman in the town over who needed basically tutoring on like Microsoft Office," and so I ended up like tutoring this guy on Word and Excel and PowerPoint and all this basic stuff.
Just making a little money.
Yeah, and he at the end of the day, he's like, "When you turn 16, I want you to come work for me." And lo and behold, I go and I become his IT director at 16. I'm like, I have my own office at this place.
Awesome.
I'm like, it was really awesome.
Yeah,
and
you
then
had business cards, I'm sure.
no, I didn't have business cards, but no, I didn't have business cards. But I had a nameplate on my wall.
Director,
There wasn't too many computers, but it was still a pretty big deal for me. But that really, between digging in with computers more on design, and then just having him, his name was Jim, as a business mentor was incredible. I mean, had it not been for that, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be doing what I do today.
And then how did you eventually get out to the Valley?
Man, a long journey. When I was almost done with college, I was, not entirely sure what I wanted to do, but at the end of the day, I was like going into design, basically. There was a point where I had an idea for a site, a company maybe, that I really wanted to pursue, and I was doing podcasting at the time, and one of the guys that I would do podcasts with clear across the country was like, you really need to start something. You should just dive in, and what do you have to lose? And so one day I broke it to my parents that I was not going to be returning to next semester.
What year were you?
I was kind of like in year 3 basically. And decided that I would take on a full-time job, work on this thing nights and weekends, and see where I took it. And so,
were they pissed, your parents?
No, I think they recognized that it's like I was going to do what I was going to do. Actually, they were very supportive, and they knew that I had a lot of desire to just try something if I really had this idea. So I ended up moving to St. Louis because it was a bigger city than where I was from, but close.
Did you meet someone out there that you wanted to work with? Or?
Yeah, I had a couple of partners that we ended up getting together. I also did a job at Best Buy part-time while I was working my full-time.
I also worked at Best Buy.
Dude, I worked at Best Buy for a long time, even before this.
Did you work in the computer area where they repaired the computers?
I was totally a Geek Squad agent. Yeah.
Oh, I was before Geek Squad.
Okay, yeah. I worked in sales, and when I did sales, I was in video games, then computers, and then Geek Squad.
That's funny.
So when I transferred to
St. Louis,
wear the
blue shirt every day, or
well,
no,
the blue shirt, and then I did the white shirt and tie.
Oh, because that wasn't management. That was
no. That was Geek Squad.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, and
That's right.
they even had like you had to get your pants short, and you wore white socks and their shoe. Like it was all this mythology of geek, and it was really cool. But when I moved to St. Louis,
that was cool, but it was something.
Oh, whatever, man. Hate.
I was embarrassed to wear that blue shirt every day. I'd like go in my khakis, like tucked in blue shirt. This is really embarrassing.
Well, I moved to St. Louis. I did this thing part-time, and on a whim, I decided to do a softball league with these guys. I got a ride from this guy that I knew was also a Geek Squad agent, and on the way, he's like, hey, what do you work on? I was like, oh, I got this job at Network Solutions, and I do graphic design for them. And he said, oh, I mean, what do you do on the side? I was like, oh, I got this idea that I've been working on. He's like, well, do you need coders? I was like, I think we're okay, and all this. He's like, I'll do it for free. It's like, I think we need coders.
Yeah, seriously.
Like,
free coder's a good coder.
And he ended up being my CTO.
Oh, sweet.
That he joined up with us. And
what project was this now that you were building?
This was Social Thing.
Okay,
This
cool.
was my first company.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is we kicked it off. We moved all into a house together. We converted the dining room into like whiteboards and desks and all this stuff. And it was just three of us that were really, by the end of it, digging in. And I decided on a whim to apply to this new thing that I saw in TechCrunch called Techstars.
You were still at Social Thing when you brought that to Techstars, right?
Right. So,
Okay.
well, I was at Network Solutions,
Right.
working for Network Solutions full time, and then saw this post about Techstars. I'm like, well, this is interesting. Whatever, long shot, but I'll give it a go. And applied.
They're, for people that don't know, they're an accelerator, incubator to help new entrepreneurs, typically young entrepreneurs, kind of get off the ground.
Exactly. And in the first year, they were going to pick 10 companies. It was brand new, but you'd get $15K.
So this was their first year, actually.
This was their inaugural year.
And that was out of Boulder? Mm-hmm. Okay.
You got $15K, supposed to last you 3 months. And at the end of those 3 months, after a lot of mentoring and all this kind of stuff, there was an investor demo day and all this thing. It was similar to the Y Combinator. It was like the second one after Y Combinator. And lo and behold, like we get the call back. I'm like, well, okay, wow, well, this is a thing. And we did interview.
Tell people about your idea real quick, about Social
Yeah.
Thing, because it's not around anymore, but it was a really popular, I had an account very early on, thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it was actually really a great tool. What we started out doing was different than after we got done with Techstars, where we started out and we were like, we want to be better than MySpace. We're going to be better than MySpace, and it's going to have Facebook features, and it's going to be all this stuff. And it was this behemoth it was a monstrosity. Like, we had all these ideas, and nothing was really fine-tuned. We got into Techstars, though, I think, out of sheer audacity of this goal, and we just had a lot of energy. And through the program, through a lot of mentoring and a lot of help, we helped refine this idea. And the idea ended up becoming, well, all of these networks are so disparate. You have friends on Twitter and Facebook and Flickr and YouTube, and it was even way more disparate and disconnected than it is today, period, right?
I probably was like a member of like 20 social services
It was ridiculous,
out there.
right?
Yeah.
And everybody was doing different things in different places, and there was no cohesiveness.
Sure.
So we wanted to build a tool where it put it all together into one place, and not just like, build an aggregating account, and then through that you get to friend other friends with other aggregating accounts, which is sort of similar to what like FriendFeed did. This was a thing that actually tapped into all the APIs at once and put all of your friends' activity, no matter if they had accounts, into one place.
Right.
Almost more along the lines of what you might see like a TweetDeck or something like that was today, but it was all web-based and pre-apps and all that kind of stuff. So we got into the program, which was awesome. We got through the summer, and then a few short months later, we launched at South by Southwest. It was crazy.
Was that the South by that I was there with you?
Yeah,
for?
it was the first. I met you maybe a bit of time prior to that, but we kicked it off the ground. It was hilarious.
Is that when you got your tat?
No, that was the next year.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. But when we kicked it off, I just remember this so vividly. We had all this press embargoed, right? Ready to go. We're like, we're going to do this. It's going to be huge. We're going to throw a big kickoff party. And we did. We threw a big kickoff party. It was like the best party that night. Had a line down the block, had bands playing, booze flowing. It was just such a phenomenal time. And at the time, this was when Twitter had track, right? And you could put in a keyword into SMS and it would just ping you every time that keyword was mentioned. Do you remember this?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I do remember that.
So I did that for social thing. And I'd get one every few days or whatever. And then all of a sudden, my phone started blowing up. Wouldn't stop. Just text, 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 text.
South by was such a great launching platform.
It was amazing back then, right?
Yeah.
So what we found, and then my phone died because I had no battery left and all this stuff.
What phone did you have back then?
Back then, I had
it wasn't an iPhone.
Oh, I had a BlackBerry.
Right? Yeah,
I had a BlackBerry.
This is like pre-iPhone, right? No, maybe right around that.
No, but I was a holdout of the iPhone.
Okay.
So I don't think I had the iPhone.
There wasn't
at the time.
apps though. There was an iPhone, but there wasn't apps.
Yeah, kind of, whatever.
Like that.
But all of a sudden we find out that TechCrunch had run the post, right? This was now 4 a.m, okay? And we were waiting till the servers went down. We were not going to leave the party until we saw that it was like critical. Servers go down, right? Because it's just inundated. We get home, all of us were crammed into one house. We'd rented a house. The engineers get going. They're working on stuff. I'm like, I have all these interviews tomorrow. I got to be fresh. So I take like about an hour's worth of sleep. The rest of these guys are working through all these issues. It was amazing. Like just looking back on it, I remember everything so vividly. But we launched, right? A few months later, launch went great, had a lot of great press. It was a lot of fun, did a lot of great stuff. A few months later, AOL approaches us. It was like,
how did that happen? What happened? Did they send you a cold email?
No, when the day before we went to South by Southwest, there was this event called Tech Cocktail. This guy Frank Gruber ran this.
Yeah, I know Tech.
Yeah, it was awesome.
They're based out of Vegas now.
And we presented. Frank really loved it, and he worked at AOL at the time. And so at some point he's like, "Hey, would you mind if I put this in front of my management?" I'm like, "Sure." And so that's where it started. Like Frank made the intro. We got a meeting together. And we went and pitched, and at some point...
What did you pitch? Were you pitching for funding? Were you pitching for... Did you know this was an M&A discussion?
It was sort of like... We knew that was a possibility. We also thought it could be partnership because maybe AIM has a connection here and all this stuff. And we talked through all of these scenarios. And at the end of the talk, it was like, well, maybe there's an acquisition here.
They said that to you, just like straight up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like maybe the best bet would be to go down that path.
How old were you when this is happening?
22.
This is gotta be crazy.
22, yeah. It was 22. Yeah, I think it was 22.
Were you freaking out? I mean, this is like your first company.
Yeah.
Did you go home and like call like... I remember when some of this stuff was happening to me at Dig in the early days. Like I called my dad up and would say, "This just happened." Like were you like calling friends up? And
it was crazy. I mean, I wasn't letting it spread as quickly because it's like, look, it was one little off the cuff remark, right? Who knows what it was going to turn into? And so, sometime later, there were some tough moments that kind of followed. Right around that time, we got to a point where we were trying to raise and all this stuff, and we weren't sure what to do next. And it came down to, hey, they're going to throw us a term sheet. The term sheet came down. We got on the phone. We had Brad Feld, who was one of the Techstars partners, help us negotiate because I'm like, I don't have a freaking clue.
Right.
And he was like, okay, what number do you want to get to? I was like, okay, this. And the best advice I ever got around this specifically was somebody told me, you need to sell for the amount of money that it takes you to never worry about this problem again.
Meaning the problem that you're working on.
Right. Because if you think about it, like the whole purpose of you building a company is to solve a problem, right?
Sure.
And if you're gonna just forget about solving this problem, then you need to be okay with that somehow. And money's maybe one way of getting there. And so,
do you think it really works like that though? Do you think like once you get that money, I'm sure it depends on how committed you are.
Head, man.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
But like to give up your baby, how much is it worth, right? So I figured out a number in my head.
What was the idea for them to continue working on the project initially?
For sure.
So they wanted you to continue that under the AOL brand.
Yeah, but you know how it always goes, where it's like an acquisition happens, and who knows, some things change, and you just don't go forward with it.
Why was that? What happened? Like you came to terms, you signed the deal.
Yep, with us, we came to terms, we signed the deal.
You got
there's a little bit of a
email address.
little tiny bit of story before I finish that. The day that we were supposed to get the final signature, okay, we were out of money. I was completely withdrawn on all of my credit cards. I had no money to borrow from my parents. We had a few weeks prior asked all of the employees, they knew about the process at this point, asked all the employees to see if they would defer their salaries, because that way we wouldn't have to bring in extra cash, which would have amounted to extra dilution, which would have meant less cash for them, right? And so all of this goes down. We had taken what little bit of money we could left, because usually when you sign these terms, you can't do anything else. You can't raise additional money. You can't do anything else.
Yeah.
So we're all hands tied. Last day that this last signature was supposed to hit, CFO of AOL. On that day, the numbers came out for Q2, and they weren't good. And starting that morning, I'm sending off emails and can't get a response. Our attorneys throwing calls to AOL. They're getting responses, but voicemail saying, hey, we really need to talk right now. I can't get any response from anybody. I'm throwing up phone calls left and right. By the time 2 o'clock rolls around, we have no response from AOL. It's like we had talked tons of times every day for however many weeks, and all of a sudden, cold.
Just went silent.
I was freaking out. I had no money. I was completely withdrawn on everything. The company had no money. We were in ruins, right? If anything, just whatever, little bit didn't pan out. And so I'm like, guys, I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm going home because I can't take the stress. I went home, I popped a Tylenol PM, and I took a nap.
Tylenol PM's pretty lightweight.
You could do a lot more damage. That's all I had, man. So I was just like, man, like the feeling that I had at that moment was just awful. And 4 o'clock rolls around. I get a phone call. There's a person running the deal, and she's like, "Hey, Matt, how's it going?" I was like, "Really? Like, it's been calling you all day. Like, I'm a little stressed right now, but it's going okay. How are you doing?" And she's like, "Great. Sorry, the numbers came out today and they weren't so great. We're still waiting on the CFO signature, but all looks good. We're gonna get this signed up tomorrow, and we'll be on our way." So it's like in that moment, you know, they talk about entrepreneurship being a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It's like in that single day, I had the single worst experience of my life, coupled with the single best experience of my life, and it's just crazy. And the transaction closed, and you know, it was like it was an incredible moment. And then we started work for AOL, and it was actually like this really amazing thing where all of a sudden we have this bigger platform. I'm a little lost because I'm, you know, 20, 23, 24. The youngest person in my position by probably 8 years, trying to figure out.
What did they give you? Just continue being like head of product on Social Thing?
Well, actually, so what we decided to do was Social Thing was going to be transitioned into, they had just acquired Bebo too. So this was going to now be infrastructure for Bebo and AIM. And that was going to be taken over by a couple of different guys. I was on new projects. So they immediately put me on this new project that they were working on, because at this point they were trying to merge all of the products that were going on inside of social with AOL. Mm-hmm. I think it was called People Networks at the time. So by doing that, I took on a different role entirely, kind of managing some other stuff and ideas and everything. And it was good, and it was a great experience, and it was neat to like learn what it was like to be a part of a big company and all this stuff. About 9 months go by, and between being too young and not really being able to have much of a say and all this stuff, and just having this deep desire to go start something new, you know, I talked to the managers. I'm like, look, I don't think that there's really an opportunity for me here anymore. And you know, they wanted me to stick around. They wanted to find a way to get me to stay around. But at the end of the day, it was mutual, right? It was like, I need to find something else, and I need to be more creative elsewhere. The good thing is that all of those guys all of my managers ended up investing in the next company. So that was the bridges were not burned by any means.
And where were you? So you moved to San Francisco at some point.
Yeah, I was in Boulder at the time. So Boulder through Techstars, Boulder all the way through this, and then started the second company, Simple Geo, started it in Boulder, and then transitioned to San Francisco after that.
Right. And so you moved to San Francisco. You'd raised some money for Simple Geo. We don't have to go. I want to get into Circa and talk more about that.
Of course.
But you spent some money chasing down the problem of geolocation, API for developers, providing them rich data for pretty much anything they want to do. An idea in my mind that was a little early, actually. Yeah. I kind of feel. I think that Apple would have paid a considerable amount for you guys.
The technology to this day. It's still incredible. What we built was really, really fantastic. And it was definitely early. Like there's so much going on in the location space now. I think it was early. But these things happen.
Why another startup? Why go on to your third? Like, how do you just have that much, like, is it just in your blood? Are you like ready to, like for me, I finished Dig and I was just like, oh my gosh, so many years. Like, I need to take a deep breath for a little bit. And, and investing was my new outlet. But like how?
I finished off with Simple Geo. I wanted to go pursue some new things. And I had a bunch of ideas. And,
why news?
Well, so that's where it all came together, right? So I had a bunch of ideas. Nothing was really, I know. We talked about this really early on, you know. I had all these ideas and none of them felt great. Okay, so I decided to stop all of the ideas. I was not going to try to be creative for a little while.
How do you work on ideas? Is it something where you have like a notepad where you just write down a bunch of stuff as they come to you?
Really?
Do you look for problems? Do you look for sectors that you're excited about?
It's problems, right? Because none of the 3 companies that I founded have anything to do with each other, other than they were a burning desire to solve a particular problem. Mm-hmm. So I've got plenty of problems that I've identified, like lots of things that it was like, man, I really think that if I could do this in this sector, maybe I could fix this problem and stuff like that. But all of the ideas that I'd come up with were solving problems. Maybe they weren't like really big and extreme and turning into big businesses, but there were things that I thought could be fixed.
Yeah. What's your process? Because I feel like you're a product guy. You're not a developer. You're like me in that way. What do you do? How do you find talent to do all of the actual tactical work, like all the back-end development work, the iPhone work? Like, where do you go for that?
Sometimes it's like finding like-minded people. First, to really flesh out an idea is still very important, right? Even though I can't necessarily put all the pieces together and start developing something, if it's an app, I can at least put mock-ups together and have somebody walk through it, or I can kind of illustrate the big picture and big idea. And if you can get somebody on board with that, then that's step 1, right? So that's a good start.
That's a great point. Totally 100% agree. The other thing I want to touch on though real quick before we go too far is that I feel like you had just moved to San Francisco. Like there's a lot of people that watch these videos that are like want to be entrepreneurs. They want to like start something of their own. I didn't mean want to be entrepreneurs. They would like to be an entrepreneur and move to San Francisco. How did you build out your network? How did you start meeting these types of people? Like did you go to bars? Did you go to events? How did you, like I think step 1 is probably just like finding like-minded people to begin with before you even share your idea.
There were never many cold introductions for me. In almost every circumstance, I worked through someone and just kind of worked my way out. Like one of the only cold introductions that I ever did was Jack Dorsey. And it was because we were doing Twitter integration really on. This was super early days of Twitter, really early days of social thing. And Jack was from St. Louis. I was living, like, it was this thing where I reached out to him and I'm like, hey, can we chat sometime? And I literally got him on the phone and we chatted for an hour about what I was planning, what he was planning, all this stuff. And it was one of the only cold introductions I ever did. From that point on, I always worked one to the next, to the next, to the next. Mm-hmm. And so, at some point,
meeting someone that knows someone.
Exactly.
And versus the random email.
It's just not going to work. It's rare that kind of stuff I think actually works out. But by going through warm introductions and having qualifying statements, it's like, at some point I met you, and then at some point, I think you maybe even were the one that introduced me to Joe, who was the co-founder of my second company. Those kinds of introductions work very well because you come in with qualifications.
Sure.
The person vets you and says, hey, I think these guys have a great idea, or I think I like this guy. I'm not sure about his idea, but with a little bit of work, maybe it'll get there. And in almost every circumstance that I've ever had a warm introduction, something has turned out good about it, right? Mm-hmm. Either that has turned into a business relationship or a personal relationship.
You just go grab coffee, stuff like that, grab a beer.
Super simple stuff. Like, it doesn't even need to be much.
Can we try another beer, by the way? I think you brought
beer,
right?
We totally should.
Graham, can you grab us one by chance?
The big bottle on the bottom left.
Cool. So you're starting to, so let's talk about the idea then. So what did you wireframe? What did you create initially? Why news, and what was the insight that you had?
So the interesting thing about this one, in December of 2011, I was at the Techstars alumni event. It was just all the alumni getting together, everybody chatting, and Ben Ha, who's the founder of the Cheeseburger Network, funny lolcat sites and all this, had presented.
Every time I hear that.
I know, it's Cheeseburger Network. I think that's his point, right?
I know, it is pretty funny.
So he had this thing where he wanted to, all right, I'll get this thing poured out. We're going to do the Southern Tier Pumpkin now.
Sweet.
It's amazing. So he had these ideas, which was, I think that there are problems in news, and I think there's probably ways to solve them. I'm not sure of them, but let me illustrate these problems. And he just presented something. It was sort of like...
So this is him pitching you on an idea.
It was him pitching a couple of problems in news. Yeah, it was like, and I... Oh, man.
Wow. Dude, this one's better than the last one.
All right, you say that. I still think
the pumpkin, this is awesome.
It's really good. Yeah, man, this is good. Ben had some really interesting seeds of an idea. They had come out of this project that he had done called the Moby Dick Project, where he got a bunch of journalism types and hacker types together at Stanford and talked through various problems of news. And it was ideas like, is the article the best possible way to present news? And big questions, right? During his presentation that he gave the Techstars group, he stuffed this in, a couple of slides, and he's like, if anybody wants this idea, let's go run with it. And I didn't have any projects at the time. I was doing some consulting and stuff like that. And I pulled him aside afterwards. I was like, I'm not really doing anything right now. Maybe over the weekend we want to brainstorm a little bit. And by the end of the weekend, we'd come up with a bunch of really neat ideas. And I said, I think that maybe there's something here. Let me go back for a while. Let me play around with some ideas on my own. Let me see if I can expand on this. And if I can, then maybe we build something. Mm-hmm. So for a few weeks, I hacked around a lot of ideas. I took those core problems and tried to turn them into potential products. And the one thing that I just kept coming back to was, why don't I read news anymore? Like real news, like current affairs, like what is going on in the world kind of stuff. And I realized, I did at one point, I was reading this stuff, and I'm not now, and it came back to this guy. I kept realizing that most of my consumption was happening on a small device. I'm just constantly reading random stuff and watching headlines and all that, but I wasn't getting real news. So I realized that, man, these articles are really long. And I think that I was starting to swipe around and, I'd see the first paragraph and be like, oh God, this is going to take forever to read. And I'd abandon it.
We're so like ADD now.
That's
awful.
Horrible. But I was doing this time and time and time again. So I'm like, mobile. And I think that's the problem. Everyone is writing articles. Everyone's writing really long articles, and they're all stuffing and shoehorning them into these like small screens where my attention span is low. All these things are happening. I go back to Ben and I'm like, I think we can do this. Like, here are some new ideas. What do you think? He's like, let's do it. So from that point on, my mission was to bring on a CTO and get the team started. So that was January of 2012, early last year.
And the first product that you launched was Circa.
Yep.
And I thought it was really, I was attracted to the product from the get-go because I've always been a snacker of news, obviously with Dig, like reading just the headlines and getting excited about that stuff. So when you could quickly flip through and just read like a summary of the news, it was instantly compelling to me.
Yeah.
But then I thought that you added something that was really interesting, which was following news stories.
Yeah.
Who came up with that idea?
So Ben, the impetus of the idea that articles as a construct are kind of problematic because you can't actually keep in touch with stuff as it happens, as it goes along. And so we pulled it all together. And the one thing that we paired the ideas together. The one thing that I came up with was, I'm not sure that you could follow a news article. You ever been on like one of those Word documents going around with like the track changes and it's like, here's the red line, here's the green and all that stuff?
Yeah.
An article would look like that. Mm-hmm. And my mom's not going to look at that. She's not going to like wait for the green to pop up and be like, okay, this paragraph is different and all that stuff. So my thought was this idea and concept of atomization, which we came up with, which is to say, let's break the news down into its core elements, the facts, the stats, the quotes, make these succinct points, and then almost do coder-like version control on stories. That's where we paired it with the follow idea. All right, so the idea that we would write a story, write 5 points, the key points, right? Not summaries in a sense of we're just trying to condense for the sake of condensing, but by removing a bunch of fluff and a bunch of other stuff, we actually break it down into the specific facts that we're really gunning for. And then as that story progresses over time, just add, right? Here's a new detail, here's a new detail.
And this makes so much sense when it comes to breaking news, because if you think about it, there's typically, like, because of Twitter and because of the nature of the web is so real time, it's like an event is like known instantly.
For sure.
People are tweeting about it, talking about it, but there are very few details. And so it's like, it makes sense to have this platform. Like, why not push out what you know, which is like 2 bullet points to start.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, just start to layer in additional details over time.
And then that's exactly what we thought with breaking news. I mean, the idea that, you know, a traditional organization has to sit and wait for 5 confirmed details for their boilerplate 500-word piece to be able to throw it out there, you know, leaves the public, you know, waiting. Or the flip side of that being 24-hour news cycle type things where they're just rampantly throwing out details that they're reading on Twitter and hearing from the police scanner and all this kind of stuff. So to put all this together into a cohesive idea meant that I would have an experience where I could find a headline, click in, read the 3 things that I need to know about this thing very quickly, like seconds instead of minutes. So I'm standing in line waiting for coffee as opposed to sitting down with a newspaper for 40 minutes with coffee. And then hitting follow and knowing that at whatever point in time this story updates, I'm going to get the changes. And then when I read it again, I'm only going to see what's new. That was the other thing, which was how many times in the course of a week do you read the progression of a news story and you read article after article after article and 50% the same day in and day out. This was about like surfacing only the things you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so how did you go about you know, building out this team? Like it's difficult. You got to think that you instantly have to have, you know, 24/7 coverage of all this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. The editorial staff was pieced together really in a cool way, which was we already knew that our platform was highly efficient. You know, especially like once a news story is created, we no longer have to write background because the background already exists. All we have to add now is points. So we knew that we'd already be pretty lean and efficient. We knew that we needed to write it because computers can't do what we're doing right now and all that kind of stuff. So we needed to find a group of journalists. We brought on this one intern, his name was Evan, last summer, and he was awesome. He helped us kind of develop the process and write some of the news stories and just experiment through the summer before we really had an actual product to speak of. He was literally writing news in, I think, like Google Docs. And he'd like add a point and he'd find the document with this one story and he'd add a point. And we were kind of prototyping this early on to develop the process before we coded it. And then once we started to put together the team, it was really neat. We had some people from that one person had like a history at the AP and others that were like tech reporters and others that were fresh out of journalism school. And everybody was a reporter in their own right, like a real journalist. But one of the things that we did very early on was bring people on in different time zones. Because even though we were focusing on sort of more US-centric news, we knew we needed to cover that 24-hour cycle. So early on we had, you know, folks in New York, West Coast, as well as we had one guy in China who's been working for, and he's still with us. And so during the twilight hours when everybody here is asleep, he's, you know, banging away at the news and helping us work out.
So what do you give them? What are the tools they have? Are they use the web? Do they use Twitter? I'm assuming they use a little bit of everything, right? Do they have monitors up watching Al Jazeera and CNN and a bunch of other different stuff?
You would think that, you know, but it's really interesting because we just don't need as much of that stuff anymore. Because we're able to distill information from a lot of different places, and because we boil it down to the facts themselves, we can gather the facts from a bunch of different places. We even go down to like court documents and research specific court documents from the computer. So the tools that we use, I mean, we use our back-end tool, we use like a chat tool that puts everybody into the same newsroom where they can communicate. You know, it's kind of scrappy, but it works. Now, moving forward, we've got a lot more sophisticated stuff coming in and a lot more technology to help us identify news and updates to existing stories and stuff like that. But we really didn't even need that stuff early on to get the stuff that we wanted to done. It worked out amazingly well for as scrappy as we were.
How did you get your traction initially? Like, what was it? Were people just, they could immediately look at this app and say, this is something I resonate with, like it makes sense to me? Was it primarily word of mouth? Was it press? Like, for a new entrepreneur that's looking to write an app and then break into the scene, like what was your approach to like getting the app out there?
In our case, we knew that we wanted a big splash on day one. You know, we had a lot of great investors up until that point, so they certainly helped us out. And you know,
how are they helping you out? What are they doing for you?
Well, kind of putting the word out. You know, they'll
reaching out to press and
to press as well as just their own Twitter followings, for example. You know, with folks like, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk, Dave Moran, Sarai Darabi, you know, they've all got 1 million+ followers, and so that's an easy way to step stuff out. But even if you don't have that, like the idea that you have a compelling product is step one, right? If you don't have a compelling product, like it's going to be hard to get the press. But if you have a compelling product, something that fits a real need, not just I'm going to be the Instagram of blank, right? But something that's like, I am solving the need of wanting to consume news when people are mobile, right? Something like that. Going from there, telling this story to various press outlets. I mean, we had an incredible press day. Day one, we
Did
had.
you get featured by Apple?
So a week after we launched, we got featured by Apple. It was
Did they
amazing.
reach out to you, or did you have some contacts there already? Or
We had been contacted. We had been touching base with them a little bit off and on, but there's no guarantee, right? You don't know that you're going to get featured. It just happens. And so, sure enough, the Thursday after we launched, there it was. And not only was it featuring, it was the editor's pick on the front page. If you opened up iTunes during the week of whatever it was, October 21st, we were there. And that was an amazing feeling, like to know that this platform that I love, like we are right there front and center.
That's awesome.
And so it was a really nice big boost. From that point on, we haven't done any marketing. So we're gearing up for this next big phase of the company where we're definitely going to be digging into more marketing here soon. But the one thing that I wanted to do, which was kind of contrary to I think what people would not expect, was I didn't want to juice numbers. I wanted to know that the product that we built was something that people deeply desired, loved, and came back to. And by doing that, if it worked, then we knew we had a product that people were going to love, and that from that point on, we could really build strong growth and tell a great story. But it's tough to play that game because it is a slow go sometimes. But we've had good growth, we've had amazing retention, like people coming back because they want to, and the stories that we get are the thing that I just love, which is that I solve the problems that I have. I like to solve the problems that I have because that's really, to me, the way that I know how to build product.
Yeah, and you wake up in the morning feeling stoted that you're actually doing something you
Right,
love.
exactly.
This is something you want to solve.
Exactly, but
Yeah,
when
totally.
I get an email from a kid, 16 years old, who's struggling in his current affairs class, all of a sudden has Circa and can now excel in his class, like that's huge. It's even every little tiny one of those stories, just one every few days, is remarkable. And that's really what kind of keeps you going in those circumstances.
What is, one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on the show is that you have some big stuff coming out. I want to talk about that. Like, what's new for you guys?
We've got some amazing stuff on the way out. This is the thing that I've been really excited about for a long time. So we've got a lot of designy things going in, much cleaner, slicker app, and that's to be expected. But we have Android on the way, which I've been excited about because it's a brand new platform. I challenged myself. I've been an iPhone user for years now, so I challenged myself to use the Android platform, try to understand. I think they've made amazing strides. I really do.
Still, iOS is your primary go-to?
It's still my primary for many different reasons, but I still carry both. I have my Android in my front pocket, and I have my iPhone in my back pocket, and I use them in different circumstances, and I try to really understand the whole ecosystem of mobile. And so I forced myself. I mean, I went deep with the Android stuff just to understand what are the modes, how do people use this, what's different about this than an iPhone. But we put together a really nice app, and it's fantastic. It's a beautiful app, and it really has a lot of great functionality, and we've been beta testing it.
Will that be out by the time this is released?
Well, I don't know when this goes out.
Whenever you want.
All right. Well, sometime late next week, and
Okay,
it'll be out.
So it'll be out by this time. Yeah. Totally.
So yeah, it'll be available very soon.
Play Store, Circa. You can
yeah.
just search for it and find it there.
It'll be there. But the thing that I'm excited about the most, we got all these great things going into it, and it's going to be nice. But the thing that kept me up was how do we solve this problem of breaking news? Breaking news is, for lack of a better term.
Problem in what way?
Well, think about it this way.
Tell me the problem.
All right. Breaking news started out, let's just take on radio, okay? Or even before that, like newspapers, extra, paper boys, read all about it, here you go, right?
Yeah.
But really breaking news hit its stride with radio because now you could break in, you could say, this thing is happening, and then you could capture their attention and hold on to them, right? Television, it was even more visceral because CNN could jump in with their Baghdad coverage and be like, this is happening, and have cameras there, and all this
as a
stuff
little
going
kid,
on.
if you knew if there was ever anything that would like take over the program.
You kind of hated it maybe, but
you freaked out though.
Yeah,
like,
but it was
something
there,
big
right?
is happening. Yeah.
Something was there. But the evolution from that point on, I've not liked. I think that it's actually been bad at this point where, you know, we had this thing where it could break and captivate me, right? And hold me, and I could watch this thing as it's happening. Mobile devices don't work like that because they send you a push notification, and that's that. That's the only recourse. And because of the speed of everything now, because of how fast this world moves now, the desire to get that push notification out so fast means that in most circumstances, there is no article. There's not even anything for me to click on. Like if I swipe in, there's like a little cell that says exactly the repeat of whatever headline I swiped in on.
Sure, I mean,
but I can't even tap it.
This is the nature of like, I mean, I follow breaking news on Twitter and some of these other accounts, and it's just like, it is what's happening right then and there.
Yep.
But I mean, but how can you fix that? Because there is no additional information.
Right. So bring in the follow, right? Our whole concept of being able to follow news is where we pair this thing and it really works. So what happens with Circa News 2 when we get it out there is we push out the notification.
Is Android going to be Circa News 2 by default?
Well, we were just putting it all into the same bucket, right?
Okay,
so,
just making sure that's the same thing, right?
It's called Circa News in the App Store and all that kind of stuff in the Play Store, but we call it Circa News 2. It's the sequel.
Internally, yeah.
The idea is this. You get a breaking news alert, you swipe in, you open it up, whatever. And even if all we had was one tidbit of information, just the headline, then you're going to get in there and you're going to see the headline. But you're going to see a little tooltip there that says, follow this to receive alerts in real time as they happen, right? So I can hit follow, and then now a big thing happens, which is, just as you mentioned earlier with breaking news, we don't have to wait for an article. We can write as these things happen, even if you just have two things, even if I've had no things or one thing. Our writers are able to push this out on a point-by-point basis as it happens.
How are you, I would imagine that in certain situations there's just like a flood of new information. Yep. It'd probably be, let's just say there's a story where you get 4 or 5 points in the first 5 minutes. Then there's a 5-minute break. Then there's another 5 points. Then there's a 5-minute break. There's another 5 points. How do you not inundate someone with like just too much?
I mean, it doesn't really happen like that, to truth be told. Like
yeah, I'm
in
curious.
A lot of
No
circumstances, like, okay, we'll take Boston. Boston was the perfect example of this. As tragic as it was, we didn't have breaking news alerts open, right? So they weren't turned on. But we had a significant number of people that opened the app and followed the story. From that point on, the news that trickled in was a trickle. We'd get one detail this hour and a few more details a few hours later, and it really doesn't flow that fast. And a lot of times, these things are conflated, whether it's like, let's just say deaths and injuries, it's like that might go into 1 point and things like that. So it's not really that much of an inundative thing. But there's other things that happen where it's like, if you have one major story arc, there may be additional story arcs that take place, and we kind of run those all separate and all this, but it just doesn't happen like that typically. There's just not much of an inundation problem.
Okay.
But the Boston thing was really interesting because we push out the first few updates and all this crazy stuff happens, and I'm able to know point by point every little detail that happens. And the moment that Circa really felt special for me, now granted this is my company and I've built this with my partners and my fellow colleagues, and it's been special all along, but I was in a hotel on the Wednesday of the week of Boston in New York. 11 o'clock that night, I opened up the app and it said that there were gunshots at the school or whatever. Didn't have any clue if this was connected with the bombing or anything like that, but I hit follow and I go to sleep. And the next morning I wake up and boom, right there, 3 new updates to the story, open it up, find out that it was the same guys, all this stuff, but like I followed that story and it delivered me exactly what I wanted because of that.
Yeah.
So for what we're doing with breaking news, Circa News 2, like we're going to get the push notification out there. You're going to see it.
And then you decide what you want to follow, what you don't want to get updates
exactly.
for. I'm curious, like I would imagine your grand, like deeper, longer term vision on this is more, I mean, would I be able to go in and say, I just want to follow breaking news on Apple. I just want to follow breaking news on Tesla, like whatever it may be.
We definitely want to get there.
That'll be pretty cool.
We have a platform that we've built to create these stories, and there's a lot of expansion we can do from here, but we definitely want to get to a point where just blunt topics you're able to say, I want to follow this person or this place or this thing or whatever, and get notified whenever stories pop up about those. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Sweet. So one thing I like to ask at the very end of all the entrepreneurs is to tell me like one thing in the past that you've done and that like really worked well for you as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That you would always continue to take forward on any company that you build, and then one thing that you just really screwed up and you're just like that you know you've learned from these last few companies that you'll never repeat again.
Yeah. So the first thing is, I think that a good formula to building a company is solving a problem, right? But constant repetition of that problem. So in my first company, we literally wrote it on the board. Does this make social networking easier, right? We just had this front and center. And anytime we'd come up with a feature, anytime we'd come up with some new idea, we'd look at that and we'd go, does that answer that question?
Yeah, like your true north. Like,
yeah. And if it didn't, it was like, nope. In very rare circumstances would we actually try to do something that didn't somehow fit that equation. And it gets a little more complicated the bigger you get and the more, ways that the product expands out. But to try to identify, like you say, that true north has been something that's been very helpful in the past. The things that, there's a litany of things that I've screwed up on in many, many, many ways. And you always learn from them, right? Every little event you learn from them. But I think that what I think about is like making sure that, and this is really simple, but it's like for the entrepreneurs that are out there, making sure that you have good legal and good financial in the beginning where you can't make...
Sounds like tell me what happened here.
Well, I mean, like this stuff happens, right? So I thought with my first company, I had done all this great stuff and I made some mistakes, but I'm never going to make these mistakes ever again. And the second company, we started out as a gaming company, and we had this employee that we brought on that was going to design the game systems. And we sort of had a handshake agreement, and there was really no talk of like specific equity and all this kind of stuff. And he just kind of got started with us. And there was this idea that, hey, we're going to turn this into a real thing, and you're being employed, and here's the stock and all this stuff. We never had real docs on this. And there was never any ill intentions whatsoever. But at the point where we decided to change the company and go from a gaming company to this tools company, his role just didn't fit anymore. And there's no hard feelings, like he was a fantastic engineer and all this stuff, just not the right fit at that moment. But we had no docs. Like nothing to say, other than like this email, like we owe you this. And so, it could have been much worse than it was. And thankfully we were able to settle it pretty easily. But it was like, just having this stuff where, if you've got agreements, like put it in writing somewhere.
Yeah.
As simple as that sounds.
Good counsel will give you like a series of docs when you launch your business.
For sure.
Like here's the docs you use with contractors, here's the boilerplate stuff that you just have ready to go for that kind of stuff.
And even in lieu of that, if you can at least like get like an email or a document that you sign or something like that, we didn't even have that sometimes. So, just making sure that you've got your ducks in a row is really important.
Yeah, no doubt. So one other question I just came up with, this is just random because we're drinking beer.
Okay.
And this might be a new addition to Future Foundations. What are the 2 apps on your phone right now, new apps that you absolutely love?
Okay.
That's a good question.
So let me use my fingerprint scanner on my on my iOS to tell you this.
I'm still mad I don't have mine yet.
It's coming. So one that this is just kind of silly actually that I really love is. Well, actually, no. I'll take that back.
Candy Crush.
I'm not going to say Candy Crush.
I spent way too much money on that.
No,
shit.
Candy Crush. No, I never played any Candy Crush. I'm not going to get into it. I saw how all you guys like lost your lives.
I lost lots of money.
2 things. Outbox. Do you use Outbox?
I've used it, yeah.
Okay, Outbox is amazing.
I think it's amazing. I hope they can get critical mass to become a profitable
Fully
business,
agree.
But yeah.
But the idea that they come, grab my mail, scan it, and it shows up on my phone is so powerful to me.
Yeah, for people that don't know, you actually get your physical mail in a scanned-in app, like as a picture on your phone, which is pretty cool.
High quality PDF, all this kind of stuff. It's amazing.
Give me one more.
So I love it. And as far as other new app that I'm a big fan of.
It doesn't have to be new, just something you really love. Like,
okay.
What about that frames per second one that you like?
All right, so I'm going to tell you, I'll tell you one real quick, then the other. Frames per second, amazing. Slow Pro. So now with the
Slow Pro, it's called?
Slow Pro, SLOPRO. With the iPhone 5S, because it can do 120 frames per second natively, I'm able to like dig in and like do certain sections as like even like 500 frames per second and actually still have a good quality.
So super slow motion. It
Super
takes
slow
that already slow motion video, makes it. Well, if someone doesn't have the new phone,
It'll still do it.
It'll still make slow motion.
Yeah.
That's
Not
cool.
quite as good, but still good.
Okay.
And Path, like Path has been in a time when Facebook and Twitter and I'm using these less and less and less. Path has been like a good way to really deeply connect with a lot of friends. One of my favorite musicians in the world, my favorite electronic musician, I've actually gotten to be quite good friends with. Happened to meet him randomly. We shared a bunch of mutual interests, and then he ended up getting Path, friended me on Path, and it's so strange that it's like you can develop like a tighter knit relationship because of like just certain kinds of things that are shared. So I'm still a big fan of Path.
Awesome. Sweet.
So.
Dude, thanks for coming on the show.
Of course.
And
Thanks
thank
a lot.
you for the beer.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers. Awesome.